Now, it's a great honor for me and tremendous pleasure to welcome our community service honorees here today, Diego de Sola and Beth Waitkus. Thank you for gracing us with your presence. Thank you for all the extraordinary work that you've done in the area of community service. And we'll hear more about that, not from me, but from others. I'd like to welcome also members of your families and your friends and some members of our Alumni Association Board of Governors. This is a great event every year because we bring two alumni here to say to them how proud we are and what pleasure we take in the work that you have done in community service. There's a long tradition of community service in this school. It seems to me that more and more of you, our current students and faculty, engage in really meaningful and productive and creative service. And we take the work of our alums in this area as an inspiration for what we do here at Hotchkiss in our local community, across the country and abroad. We do service essentially because it is the right thing to do. It is a wonderful thing to be able to offer what we have to other people. Sometimes, usually, they on the surface have less than what we have. And we learn a huge amount about them and their needs and their lives by offering good service to them. And in return, of course, we learn a great deal about ourselves. Opening yourself, opening ourselves to others in that way is a kind of a mirror because we learn not only about them, but about ourselves. And that expression of interdependence is really what community service is all about. In addition to our two alums on stage today, we have, of course, two current students who will be speaking about our Community Service Award recipients. And we also have Katie Belandi, class of '88, who is the Alumni Association Board of Governors President. And Katie, it's a great pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much indeed. So I'm not going to say anything more right now. I'm going to hand over to Katie, and we will hear from her and others. And please enjoy what is a very inspiring and uplifting occasion. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you, Malcolm. I'm appreciative of this lift here behind the podium. I've never felt so tall before. So I am here as the president of the Board of Governors of the Alumni Association, but I'm standing in for the president of the nominating committee of the Board of Governors, George Takutis, class of '87, who could not be here today. So as the chair of that nominating committee, he sends his very best to everybody, and deep congratulations to both of you. Good morning. I'm honored to represent the Hotchkiss Alumni Association Board of Governors as we present the 2013 Community Service Awards. This year we honor, as you know, two remarkable alumni, Beth Waitkus and Diego de Sola, class of '91 and class of '79. Some of you, as students, have sat in this room for 4 years listening to these awards, and for some of you, it is your first experience. And before Karma and Sebastian introduce our honorees, I'll tell you just a bit about the history of this award. As Malcolm touched upon, service to others has been a foundation stone of the lives of every generation of Hotchkiss students, beginning with the founding of the St. Luke's Society 120 years ago. The Community Service Award was established in 1992 at the 100th anniversary to honor the good works of Hotchkiss alumni and to signify our belief in the ideal of service to others. Each year, the members of the nominating committee of the Board of Governors begin a new search and selection process, and we are humbled and inspired by the passion, imagination, perseverance, and good-heartedness of so many Hotchkiss alumni. The candidate profiles we read are filled with examples of alumni who have addressed the needs of their communities and relieved suffering through medicine, education, job training, legal or political advocacy, environmental policy making, and many other endeavors. Given the high level of achievement of the Community Service Award recipients, it is especially noteworthy that 7 of them were young alums who honored within 10 years of their graduation. Oliver Berry, class of '01, was honored in '07 for his work as founder and trustee of the Kuchiktikela Foundation, a nonprofit which provides scholarships and mentoring to Zambian boys and girls who are academically promising but financially disadvantaged. In fact, in their January 2012 newsletter, there's a report of 100% of their first class of 10 students, all graduated and all are preparing for college. I can list a few others. In 98, Alice Brazelin McClellan, class of '89, was a recipient. Margaret Driscoll, '85. Linda Van Voorhees, '89. Frankie Cruz, '85. And Allison Walker Williams, class of '82. All considered young alums. When you graduate and become a Hotchkiss alum, you will contribute in your own ways to this impressive legacy. Clearly, many of you have already found a passion for service. Others of you will find it later in life as your experiences lead you in new directions. All of us who take part in the awards process hope that the stories you hear each year from these outstanding alumni will inspire you as much as they do us. We are so grateful, Beth and Diego, that you are here today. One of my favorite aspects of this Community Service Award ceremony is having current students introduce the winners. It reminds me how we, whether on campus or living as alumni out in the world, are all connected and all representatives of this remarkable school. At this time, I would like to welcome Sebastian Sanchez, class of 2014, to introduce Diego. And then, after Diego speaks, we will be welcoming Karma, class of 2013, to introduce Beth. Congratulations, Diego and Beth.
Born in El Salvador, Diego H. de Sola left when he was 8 years old due to the Civil War. He ended up in Florida and later moved to New Jersey. Having been forced out the country by the war, Mr. de Sola said that he felt more like a foreigner or a visitor rather than a minority within the United States. In 1988, he enrolled at the Hotchkiss School as a new lower mid. As one of the few Hispanic students in the Hotchkiss community, he noted that the challenges he faced in his years at Hotchkiss were tough and trying, and he learned a lot from them. Clearly, he was able to persevere. After Hotchkiss, he attended Cornell University, where he graduated in 1995. In his years after Cornell, Mr. de Sola went on to accomplish a number of things. He returned to El Salvador, where he worked at the TACA International Airlines as an international marketing manager. In New York, he worked at both Citicorp Securities and Solomon Smith Barney, earning his MBA from the Stern Graduate School of Business at NYU. Mr. de Sola is also CEO of his great-grandfather's company, Inversiones Bolivar, known for its solid reputation as a property developer. In 2004, he joined the Aspen Institute, a nonprofit that fosters ideas for a better society. In 2010, he was nominated Hotchkiss Alum of the Month. In 2012, the World Economic Forum selected him as a young global leader. Most notably, he is a co-founder of Glasswing International, a non-profit organization where he sits as president of the board of directors. Mr. de Sola lives at home in El Salvador with his wife, Alexandra, his 3 boys, Diego, Xavier, Herbert, and Alejandro. Through Glasswing, de Sola and his supporters have devoted their lives to transforming the communities in Central America, enhancing educational opportunities for the youth, implementing health and economic initiatives, and encouraging collective participation in improving the quality of life. Glasswing International provides extreme school makeovers, volunteer-led after-school programs, and health plans which strengthens the link between private and government institutions and the community itself. He has devoted the second half of his young life to bettering the lives of others around him, creating an integrated society in which individuals jointly assist and fostering an environment of cohesion and mutual respect, an environment in which each person can harness his or her individual skills to become an agent of change. Here, we see a man from humble and modest beginnings, a man who pursued the chance to make an impact in his country, a man who came back to his origins to improve the quality of life. Let him be a model for all those here. He has worked to become an agent of change. Please join me in welcoming Diego H. de Sola to the stage.
So the first thing that's a little difficult to get used to is being called Mr. de Sola. But I can get used to being up high here. I have to first thank the Board of Governors. Thank you, Katie and George, who couldn't join us today. Thanks to our head of school and the whole Hotchkiss team. I want to thank the family, Diego Javier, my son, who's here with us, and congratulate Beth on this wonderful honor we shared today. So it's exciting, it's a little humbling to be here today. I listened to the bio and it kind of makes you squirm a little bit because it's not usually read aloud and you try to avoid it whenever it happens. But a situation and an occasion as this, when you're called in and honored, I hadn't been back here in 22 years, and see good friends, Jim Dubinsky, make the trip, John Bordeaux, who was with us, so classmates, see teachers I haven't seen in quite a number of years. It's pretty incredible. So I know I'm gonna pull this thing off so that I can actually address people in the back as well. I know that today was supposed to be about Glasswing and about what we've done and the work we've accomplished in our 5 years. And it's been a great trip, and it's been a huge learning opportunity. But I'd like to talk to you a little bit about this kind of speech writing was a bit cathartic, I have to admit. The experience of coming through here and what I've been learning along the way. I am an absolute work in progress, but I've learned a few things that I've thought interesting to share with you about discovery, about service, about authenticity, and about the wake that we all leave behind. So 20-some odd years ago, I was sitting in, not here evidently, but in another auditorium, Walker, and I was being taught how to be rigorous and how to be curious and how to be insistent and how to think critically, all things that you might not realize it now, but they're unbelievably useful as we go through life. But also, I was pretty intimidated. And I was intimidated by my surroundings and specifically intimidated by people sitting to my left and right and behind and in front. And a lot of my time, I was kind of obsessing about how I could stand out and at the same time fit in. And it became this thing that was, it was almost a dependency on praise. You know, how can I get people to say what you do is right, what you do is good, what you do is worthy? And it became almost a habit. You know, so what I would say, what I would do was all directed towards eliciting some sort of positive feedback, or in any case, avoiding rejection. So all in, I was pretty stressed. I look over the Facebooks, but now I'm surprised that the physical ones still exist, and wondering, you know, what do they write next to my picture? You know, because we used to write, I don't know if people still do that, but, and of course my big fear was I would just get passed over. And then close second was that some girl would write, oh, he's a nice guy, which was devastating. And so you have a situation where you have this dependency where you need need validity, you need validation rather. And so I shared this with a couple of friends on a couple of occasions, and surprise, surprise, it's not unique to me, it's not unique to high school, it's not unique to almost any other world. But it seems also to me that people pick up this nasty habit along the way that prevents us from doing stuff that helps us grow as human beings, that helps us kind of grow into our skin. And there's not enough praise in the world from anybody, no matter how much you respect, that's going to fill a void that only I can fill or you can fill. So to the point, 7th grade, not in Hotchkiss, an English teacher once told me, you know what, Diego, you're never going to amount to much. And I said, okay, never going to forget that guy. And so since then, you know, since I left Hotchkiss here, when I was here, I found amazing inspiration, great friends, great mentors, great role models. Photo Bob, Heiko, who made the trip, I appreciate that very much, the long trip, and others, and people who I've run into in the hallways that have just been sources of great inspiration, and I look back on very fondly now, back from home. But then, and well, anyway, so after Hotchkiss, I come out of this place, out to the real world that's out there, and I did a few things. I worked in an airline, you know, Sebastian mentioned. I worked in an airline, worked in banking for a while, I got a master's degree, and learned a lot in the last couple of years. I've had the privilege of being invited to a couple of leadership fellowships at the Aspen Institute, where I'm now moderating, actually, leadership seminars, and at the World Economic Forum. So a few things have happened since then. I've married a wonderful woman who this year is 15 years of marriage, and the marriage has blessed us with 3 spectacular kids, the eldest of which is sitting in front of me, Diego Javier, who's 12, and Ache, who's 9, and actually his name is Herbert. We call him Ache, just the H, because we thought it was cooler. And so now I'm taking all sorts of paraphernalia back for him, as you can imagine, with the H. And Alejandro, who's 5, he's turning 6 in a couple of weeks. And now here I am, right? Here I am, 40 years old, being called Mr. de Sola, in front of a people who I respect and admire quite a bit. And who would have known? I mean, there's no way. I mean, if you had made me bet, there's absolutely no way I would have been standing here in front of you people. No way. But here I am. So you can imagine, right? I would have loved to wave these accomplishments in front of my English teacher's face, right? I would have loved to put like a little bio next to my Facebook picture so people wouldn't pass me over. But you know, I know that doesn't make you feel better about yourself. And that doesn't really go very far because it's still not about praise. You know, while you have accomplishments, you have shortcomings, but in the end, it's just the output of what you believe in, put into action, for better or for worse. They're just outputs, and you're no better or worse of a person for it. And that's kind of what I've, over the years, tried to convince myself of, and I'm still in the process of working on it, that you're no better or worse for good or bad things you do. You have to really just apply yourself and apply your criteria and be honest with what you think. And so I could have bought any one of a number of self-help books to read that, but I had to learn the hard way. And these days, you know, we hear people talking about leadership and the need for empathy and the need for service and all this stuff. And you hear, as our head of school was mentioning, conflicts around the world. You hear a lot of very tense situations politically, economically, socially around the world, and you see a lot of very, very stressed out human beings around. And so what is it we're really after? So if you believe Aristotle, he says the only true end is happiness, right? That everything else can only be a means to that end. And so I'll buy it for now and for the purposes of today. And if that is the only true end, how do we get there? And so I'll submit to you some tips. I feel a little odd giving advice because I still don't feel old enough to do it, but take it or leave it as you will. And those tips have to do with discovery, with authenticity, service, and the wake. So discovery. You have to make it a point from now to discover, and if you've already been doing it, all the better, to discover yourself, to find out what you're all about, to find out what's important to you, to find out what it is you like, what you don't like, and look at yourself. And watch yourself when you interact with other people. How do you react to situations? And when you watch yourself react to situations, you'll learn quite a bit about yourself. And don't make the mistake that I made for years of judging yourself for what you see. Instead, you observe, you appreciate, and then you modify as needed, right? So number 2 is authenticity. When you begin this process of self-discovery, of knowing yourself, you start actually trusting yourself. And that's when you allow yourself to be authentic, right? Everybody says, be yourself. And that works, and if you can do it based on just that, that's great. But really, being yourself entails knowing yourself first, right? And so when you go through the process of discovery, and you can be authentic, you can start learning to trust yourself, and then others are going to start trusting you as well. In terms of service, when we volunteer, when we help others, I know a lot of people here doing spectacular things, and we were talking about it with Beth last night. When you serve, conflicts of interest, when you serve, things that differentiate you from other people fall away, right? So you're together serving a third party, and that automatically generates bridges of trust. And when you serve, it forces you to forget yourself, just a little bit. It forces you to focus on the person you're serving. And when you focus on the person you're serving, again, you learn a skill where it's not about me, it's about somebody else. And that lets you get comfortable in your skin, and it forces you to shift that perspective from outside in to inside out, which for me has been very important. And finally, the wake we leave behind. My invitation to you would be to examine the wake. As we go through, as soon as you're born and you take in your first breath, you've changed the world. And you change it every day with thousands of decisions you make, right? And so we have to own up to it and take responsibility for it. So when you turn around and look at the wake that you're leaving behind, it's going to be a good wake, a bad wake. Parts of it's good, parts not so good, maybe small, maybe big. But when you look at it and when you take that time to do it, it allows for a little bit of introspection, and you say, okay, what do I want to do? What do I want to leave behind in that wake? Do I want to amplify it? Do I want to improve it? And at least my belief is that the vast majority, if not all of us, do have a fundamentally good intention to be somebody who leaves the world a little bit better than we found it, right? So is the world better or worse because I existed? Would be the question I would pose to you. And this can start the minute we get up. This can start the instant you get up and walk out in the hallway. The way you interact with people is leaving a wake. You're leaving an emotional wake, an intellectual wake. You're leaving a mark of sorts. So I would invite you to really think about what it is. So that's it for me. Before I say goodbye, I want to thank the Board of Governors again, everybody for this invitation and this award, which is, again, very, very humbling and very unexpected. I am thrilled to be back here. The thing I've told people when I walk into the main building, it still smells the same. So I kind of freaked out when I first walked in. But it's spectacular, and I want to wish each and every one of you healthy doses of discovery, of authenticity, of service, so that you can all leave a bigger and better wake behind for the world. Trust me when I tell you, you will be happier for it. Thank you very much.
To raise awareness, inspire action, and create sustainable results. That is the motto of Miss Beth Waitkus, class of 1979, this year's recipient of the Community Service Awards. Ms. Waitkus is the founder and director of the Inside Garden program at San Quentin Prison that rehabilitates prisoners through organic gardening. Ms. Waitkus cultivated her love for nature at an early age right here in Lakeville. She spent much of her childhood exploring in the woods and sailing on Lake Woonasquapomic. She entered Hotchkiss as a prep in 1975, which was only the second year that women were admitted. She graduated in 1979 and went on to earn her bachelor's degree in political science from Tufts University and a master's in organizational development from Pepperdine University. After the tragedy of 9/11, she wanted to give back to her community, and a friend introduced her to the Inside Prison Project. a leader in prison reform and prisoner rehabilitation. After receiving intensive volunteer training at San Quentin, she decided to establish a rehabilitative gardening program there called the Inside Garden Program. The program includes in-prison classes and experiential contact with the 1,200 square foot organic garden on the prison yard. Through the act of caring for plants, the qualities of responsibility, discipline, and mindfulness transfer to the interpersonal realm. By growing plants, people also grow. By working in nature, participants learn vocational and life skills so they can practice constructive relationships between themselves, their community, and the natural environment, becoming productive members of society. Through its partnership with Planting Justice and Rubicon programs, the Inside Garden Program continues to provide care for men even after their release by finding them gardening work. Since 2001, more than 1,000 prisoners have participated in the program. A former prisoner said of the program, "Now that I can better nurture a plant and care for the environment, let me apply those same principles to myself for my own growth and purity. Let us not pollute the earth with chemicals, nor ourselves with impurities." In 2011, a recidivism study was conducted involving 117 men who had been paroled between 2003 to 2009. It found that less than 10% returned to jail within a 3-year time frame, compared to the state's 70% recidivism rate, proving that the program was indeed a success. Some future goals include developing San Quentin's first vegetable garden and replicating the Inside Garden Program at other California state schools. On this matter, Ms. Waitkus stated, "Our work requires enormous tenacity in a system with such resistance to change. But we intend to change that system from the ground up, one person at a time." Ms. Waitkus' commitment to transforming people, communities, and organizations through connection to the natural world is truly inspiring. It is my honor to present this year's Community Service Award to Ms. Beth Waitkus.
Do that, and Jonathan will want to come down. Come down this way, and we'll just do it.
Wow, it's amazing to be back here, to be with you all today. I remember as a student watching people come speak to our auditorium in Walker and going, "Oh wow, how do they do that?" And here, I've been invited back. So I'm very humbled, as Diego said, and thank you so much for your work in the world. Thank you to Karma for your lovely introduction. I'm very humbled to be here as well. And I thought I would share with you kind of how I got from Hotchkiss to prison. How's that? Okay. First of all, to the Hotchkiss Alumni Association Board of Governors and to the Hotchkiss community, I offer my most heartfelt thanks for this 2013 Community Service Award. I accept it on behalf of more than 1,000 men who participated in the Inside Garden program and whose lives continue to be transformed through connection to nature. Hi back there. I also extend my love and gratitude to my family and friends and the faculty who are here today, some of who taught me many years ago and who have in many ways been part of my journey. And to all of the current students who are planting the seeds of future care, community service, and building a better world. Finally, thanks to Patty O'Connor, who has so graciously helped prepare logistics for this visit and who's been there every step of the way. You've been great, thank you. I'd like to start off with a quote I first discovered reading The Little Prince in French in Bob Hawkins' class many, many years ago. I don't know how many of you have heard of the Hawk, but yes, he was. It was a beautiful quote from this amazing book, The Little Prince. "It's only with a heart that one can see rightly. What's essential is invisible to the eye." So I am going to share the story of how I ended up from here to there. And it did start here in Lakeville, where I grew up. Not such a beautiful day today, but I did grow up here in these gorgeous hills, playing in the streams, sailing on the lake, wandering in the woods. And nature is now, as it was then, my refuge. And I also come from a lineage of gardeners, from my grandmothers through my mothers, through many, and I love to garden, I always have. When I entered Hotchkiss in the early 70s, the school had just welcomed girls, as Carmen mentioned, the year before. There were 4 of us in our prep class, 4 women, 4 girls. We were, upon reflection, pioneers, and faced some really interesting challenges those first few years at Hotchkiss, as I'm sure some of you who've been here that long remember. There were also times of great national and international upheaval. We had Watergate and the oil crisis. As the outside world swirled around us in this bubble, we remained somewhat protected and only remotely aware of the massive shifts underway. Back then, we didn't have email or computers or even cell phones to connect us. We only had TV and radio and, honestly, each other. As part of that larger shift, I shifted too, thanks to an evening in Walker Auditorium when consumer advocate Ralph Nader came to speak. He spoke passionately about the auto industry in the context of consumer rights and large corporate interests at the expense of our environment and our people. At that point, I didn't even know what fossil fuels really were, where they came from, or why I should care. But he stood up for the rest of us, demanding large systems change, and predicted back then what is now our current state of environmental degradation, the gaps between the rich and the poor, and important issues of social justice. For me, he planted a seed, not to use a garden metaphor. Although I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, after graduating from Hotchkiss or even college, there was a restlessness to make a difference. What I did know intuitively was that I wanted to integrate my love for the natural world with my work. So over the years as an activist, I began to find my place in the world. I dabbled in politics, having been a poli-sci major in college, ran social marketing campaigns for federal government programs in Washington, D.C. And in some of those arenas, my head and heart weren't always aligned. For me, it was uncomfortable to do someone else's bidding. Corporate public relations is where I finally ended up when I moved to San Francisco in the late 90s. And then I had another big shift, as Karma mentioned, when the jets flew into the World Trade Center. Lost a classmate, Dave Beret, in that. And it just completely transformed my life overnight. From then on, I knew I had to live a life more aligned with my heart. And to do that, I would have to reestablish my faith in human capacity for transformation and for goodness. So through a very interesting series of synchronistic events, the year following 9/11 led me straight into prison. Not as a prisoner, but as a person who was interested in doing work there. I wanted to practice being present with a group of people that I thought that would actually be very difficult to do with prisoners. When I was asked to start a gardening program there, despite all odds, I did. In those beginning months, the staff was steadfastly against any gardens on a prison yard. Why do you think they'd care? They were afraid the prisoners would plant weapons in the garden instead of flowers. So coming from this fear-based frame, this is what I was dealing with to try to create this change in a place that is just so incredibly resistant to change. And at the helm of San Quentin in 2002 was a woman, Jeannie Woodford. She was the warden there. And she had faith, too, that working in a garden would be at least therapeutic, and at the most therapeutic, and at least keep the men really busy. With her leadership, she led our effort for a garden on a prison yard in this institution that really wasn't. And I just want to tell a really short story that we had one officer who was this big burly, he was a lieutenant, big burly guy with a crew cut, and I remember one day he said, you know, you can't have a garden here it's just, there's a memo from Sacramento, which is the capital of our state, that says we can't build gardens on prison yards. And I just remember looking at him and saying, is that so? Show me the memo. And they couldn't ever come up with it. And about 3 months later, he came up to me on the prison yard and he said, you know, Beth, I think that little plot over there of land would be awesome. Would it be okay if I grew some pumpkins and sunflowers there just until you have your garden ready? And I thought, are you kidding me? This lieutenant in a prison yard is asking me for permission to build on California Department of Corrections property. And I thought, something is changing. Something was shifting. So we finally did plant the garden. It took a lot of false starts. They moved the location in several areas to several different areas. But during the winter solstice of 2003, we planted this gorgeous urban, you know, like rosemary, lavender, herbal and flower garden. And it became an experiential lab for men to learn landscaping skills and to tend what they call the inner gardener. They worked quietly those few days as they were installing the garden, for them what might become a path to salvation. Over the years, our garden has become a place that represents connectedness, interrelation, and wonder. It's a place where prisoners name the bugs, they pet the bees, seriously, they pet the bees, and they tend to themselves and each other. They literally stop to smell the roses. They learn about landscaping and gardening, food, farming, and urban agriculture, human ecological connections, and green jobs. And it's the only place in the prison where races mix without any fear of retribution. There are gangs all over the prison yard. They stay in their sections based on the color of their skin, and the garden's the only place where they work together. With all of this, the seeds of compassion, forgiveness, and care are nurtured both in the garden and our classroom circles. For the men, their shift happens somewhere between understanding that they alone are responsible for their behavior and feelings and for how they show up in the world. When they stop blaming others for that which binds them, they gain a greater level of consciousness, and the healing can begin. We are about restoration. We are not about punishment. And although these men come from backgrounds we can't even begin to imagine, we give them a second chance and even a third or a fourth chance, whatever it takes. We are willing to hang in there with them because we realize that growth and change is a lifelong possibility and process. When those in our program leave prison, most of them don't come back. They become productive members of society and have a new commitment to caring for each other and the world. So along with our garden, where nature teaches us everything we need to know because of its diversity, the cooperation, the beauty of systems working together, these men are my teachers. When they can touch their own humanity, they open up to the possibility of transformation. They offer me hope time and time again in the human capacity for change and for good in the world. So being here today in front of all of you, and some of you, back of all of you, I am so touched to see the evolution of an institution which has evolved into a community, deeply committed to service, environmental care, and of course lots more women. You are all a great reason for hope. You can follow your heart. You can dare to be different. You can take your leaps of faith and let the passion for the things that you care about guide your lives. We have to be the change we want to see in the world, and we have to do it together. I'd like to close with a quote from Steve Jobs, who, while struggling with cancer, offered these great words of wisdom to Stanford University students. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living somebody else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. Again, thank you all so much. This is an incredible honor, and on behalf of all of us at the Insight Garden program, thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Diego. We admire you. We are very, very proud of you, and we are inspired by you. As we leave here, let's just think about feeling rightly with our hearts. Let's think about building those bridges of trust. Let's think about losing ourselves in the service of others, because not only will we help those people, but we'll also find ourselves and lead lives that are authentic. Thank you very much, all of you. Have a great day.